excited. I'm Jena Rodriguez, and we're going to talk about in my kind of new series. I'm calling it the contagion of wisdom, right? And I think we really are needing the conversation around how do we become more wise? How do we start to become more self-aware? How do we become more conscious and actually like be with the way things are right now and of course these steps are valid any time of year, any time of life, any time going forward, but especially right now. I know we're all on top of each other. We've got our families. For the most part, if you've got kids, things are getting triggered, things are happening, and I want to give you some 5 steps, easy steps to consider on making peace with it and creating more peace in your household, or more, maybe a little more harmony, right? So raise your hand, give me a like or something if you can relate to this, or you're getting a little more triggered, or things kind of ebb and flowing at a faster pace, right? The roller coaster is happening. I know from experience that, this can be so, and especially when stressors from the outside world, circumstances are getting our feathers ruffled. Is that a word? Feathers ruffled. Is that it? I almost said it backwards. Anyway, if you're here, please say hello if you're here live. And make sure if you find value in this to share it, tag me in it, like it, love it, all of those fun things, just to know that this is resonating with you. All right, so let's dive into this. First of all, you may very well be looking for an answer. Hi, Vaughn. Hi, Jay. To make sure that you fix them, right? How do I fix them so that I'm at peace? How do I look at the situation and tell them how they need to move it around or change it up or whatever, and then I'll be okay, right? And so, here's the truth. It's not outside of you. And so we're going to dive into the 5 steps that you get to personally take. Number 1, I always talk about the fundamentals, which is personal ownership and self-awareness. So the first step 1, is aware of it. Be aware of it. Be aware of what you are going through, what's triggering you, and own that it's coming from you out, right? And it doesn't mean it won't exist, doesn't mean it won't happen, but the awareness that it is happening, the awareness that you have personal ownership of how you react and how you respond and what gets triggered, and etc., is the first step. You've got to be aware, and self-awareness is the first step to any change happening, especially if you want to create a household that's peaceful, that's harmonious. I'm tongue-tied today, so forgive me already. And so that is the first step. The second step is you've got to identify it. You got to identify what is it that is your mind is creating, your small mind, I call it the ego, right? That is creating that discord, and then you get to look at what's underneath it. So I call that the ego tricks, right? And if you haven't heard me talk about ego tricks, I'll give you a link to a download, a PDF where you can get all 14 of them. I would gather that we are probably dancing around all 14 ego tricks right now, trying to keep the peace, right? And so, you might be arguing over dinner, or you might be arguing over the dishes, or you might be arguing over financial concerns, right? Or you might just be feeling really stressed and fearful, or whatever it is. And you may go in and out of like, I've got this, and wow, this is really upsetting me, or I feel sadness, or I feel emotion, or what have you. And so the second step is to identify the ego trick that's got like a noose around your neck, right? And so again, I'll give you access to those 14 ego tricks so you know what I'm talking about. For instance, fear is an ego trick, right? It is an illusion that our mind likes to live in so that it doesn't have to be in the now, it doesn't have to be in reality, and it tries to mitigate risk by being fearful. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but it is how we work. So our ego is always looking for certainty to keep us safe, keep us contained, all of that, right? So that's just one of them, just to give you an idea. Number 3 is to hack it. So when you feel or experience and are aware of, right, step 1, of the ego trick playing you, right, it's happening, then you got to hack it, right? And what does that look like? So if you are in some kind of fear or you're stressed out about something, which just might be, it might look like concern or worry, or it's keeping you up at night, then you got to hack it. And the way you hack it is to ask yourself some really profound questions. Number one, what am I afraid of? What am I worried about? Right? Get clear on the story, because otherwise you're just in reaction, and the peace will be very hard to find if you're constantly operating on top of something that you're unaware of, right? And that's the hack, right? You got to ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I attached to? What am I, requiring in this situation that is not happening? What am I, feeling, right? Just figure it out and ask those questions. And then number four, hug it. What does that mean? Notice I'm just aware of it, identify it, hack it, and then now we're going to hug it. And what that means is you got to forgive yourself. You got to forgive you, and you got to forgive others. They are operating off the same grid, right? The same operating system, although they have their own, right? It's the same process that everybody's going through. Our kids are too. And if you have teenagers, if you have children, they're also operating, and they've got their own ego tricks, and their ego is trying to keep them safe in an uncertain time. And so you got to forgive, you got to hug it out. You got to be a little more compassionate. You got to be a little more communicative and say, wow, I just realized that I'm operating on top of some worry and fear this morning. I got an email that triggered me, and but they don't know that, right? So you got to communicate what's happening for you. And if your kids can hear you, if you do have children, if they can hear you, obviously at an appropriate age level conversation, but if they can hear you work things out for yourself and take personal ownership, they will feel safer to do the same. Very big. And when you're an emotional mess and they see it, but you don't explain it, they're making up their own stories about it. They're adopting their own beliefs about what you're going through. They're looking at you, they're mirroring you, they're watching you. And if they don't have some comprehension of the truth, then they're left to their own stories and make believe, right? So hug it out, forgive. And then number five, which is kind of what I just started to move into, is reframe it. Reframe it for yourself and reframe it for the others in the household. So these are the 5 steps to create peace in your household. Real quick review: aware of it, right? Self-awareness. Identify it. Figure out what those ego tricks are. What is it that's going on? What is the attachment? What is the struggle? What is the concern that you're operating on top of that you may not be even in the moment aware of? You may think it's the dishes. You may think it's your rightness about the dishes or whatever, right? And yet it's not. It's something much deeper. So we got to get to the source of it. And then you hack it. Then you hug it, right? You got to forgive. You got to forgive yourself. You got to be like, wow, I'm just in a space. I'm just in a space that, and reframe for yourself and reframe it for them. And reframe can be a sense of, number one, it can just be it's somewhat a band-aid, because I really want you to move through the detachment method that I offer. Again, I'm going to give you the link to that, where you get to the source and the emotional trigger that is actually creating and having you be in the ego trick itself. But in the meantime, you can reframe it, calm down, create some peace and calm, and then revisit your family, right, if you're hanging out with them. And this can be, so even if you're single and you're meeting people online and you're dealing with, you're talking to your distant family and friends and colleagues, all of us are human, and we're all in a space of being triggered, and this is just a time where it's getting amplified. So peace and calm in your household is really owning where you are, personal ownership, being aware of it, and taking these steps to actually process through it. All right. I love being with you guys every Tuesday. And I maybe can be, hopping in here even more frequently. This is the contagion of wisdom that I'd like to share, right? Let's have that go viral. And in the meantime, please share with me other strategies that you might be using. and put them in the comments. And I see some great people here. Hey, Jeremy, Jack, I love seeing you. And there's a couple that say Facebook user because so forgive me, I'm not sure of your name, but I will come back to the thread and check you out. Hey, Paul Tobman. Oh my gosh, I've been thinking about you. And Vaughn, always good to see you. So until later, have an amazing day. Be peaceful, be self-aware, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Happy Tuesday.